Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about the pros and cons of long RPGs. This comes from a very interesting question that I got on my game length video a couple months ago, asked by Alessandro Gambino, who asked, assuming that the vast majority of CRPGs are long games in your classification, some RPGs are longer than others. What are the pros and cons of a 100 plus hour RPG compared to a 30 to 40 hour one in your experience? That's a good question because they're absolutely right. There are RPGs tend to be longer than a lot of other games, especially one full session, compared to like a roguelike or card games or whatever, or shoot 'em ups. One session can be very short in those. So I do want to talk about this, and whenever I say long in this video, I will mean 100 hours or more. And anything shorter than that isn't a long RPG. If you need a concrete example to think of, let's compare Arcanum and Fallout. Fallout was designed to be about 20 to 40 hours to play through, and the story was 3 acts. Get the water chip, kill the master, deal with the mutant army. Arcanum, on the other hand, was designed to be at least 40, if not 80 hours, and certainly well over 100, 120 hours. If you wanted to try to do everything and go everywhere, I mean, its story act was, there were 20-some story acts. It was a long story act we made. I remember thinking afterwards, this is probably too long. And also, because the world was procedurally generated, you could go lots of places, and there were random encounters that depended on your level and what type of sector you had entered. Was it a forest? Was it grassland? Was it coastal? So there was a lot of things you could do in that game without even going into the handcrafted stuff. So you could really, really stretch out an Arcanum session. One more thing I want to mention, though, because I make that distinction once in this video, is 100. There's a difference between an RPG that you can play for more than 100 hours with one character versus what people would consider, I played this game for over 100 hours, but I made different characters. I had multiple full play sessions all the way through the story. I'll throw that in one place where I think it makes a distinction. So I broke this up into pros of long RPGs and cons of long RPGs. So let's go through the pros first. If you have a very long RPG, you can tell a very, very deep story. Like I mentioned with Arcanum has 7 to 8, possibly 9 times the number of acts in its story. So even though these are as the acts unfold, you can do them in many different ways. Now you could do it in different ways in Fallout, but there were only 3 acts, and I didn't even have to do the acts in a particular order. What that means is there was a lot more reactivity in Arcanum, both immediate reactivity, you do something and you immediately have a faction change, a PC doesn't like you anymore, and then long-term stuff like, okay, because you chose to kill this person, you now have to do this thing to advance the story rather than this other thing. A lot of this has to do with player build support. You could make a lot of different player characters in Fallout, but you could make a lot more in Arcanum. Arcanum has everything that Fallout had, skills and bonuses you get as you level up. But it also had, the whole magic tech thing. Making a magic character was very different than making somebody running around with guns. And you could also stay right in the middle and say, I'm just going to be a bow and arrow player or a swords player. Because we had all those different player builds, there was a lot more reactivity. There was a lot more things we looked for. We looked for, what you were wearing. We looked for ways you finished quests. We had a lot more exploration in Arcanum. The game world, the world map was way bigger, and sections of it were dynamically generated. So there was just a lot more to do, and a lot more to do meant there was a lot more support for those different player builds. Because one thing you have to think about is if you make a shorter RPG, there may not be a lot of things for one particular kind of build to do. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's it has a reverse true of Arcanum being a long RPG. There was a lot of stuff we did that you may have never seen, but I'll talk about that in the con section. Here's where I want to make the divergence between playing a long game with one character and playing a long game with lots of different characters. If you can make a lot of different player builds, people probably will want to replay it more. So you've increased replayability, which then increases the total playtime, the engagement that players have with your game and how they feel about your game. I mean, if you spend 100 or more hours with a game, you probably are really engaged. If you didn't like it, you would have stopped playing, 95 hours earlier. So because of that, there's probably more discussion about your game, more reviews written, more editorials, more online comments, forums filled with people talking about all the different things they did, which then generates more interest. Huge for you as a game developer. If you can really make a game that's that big and that engaging, you're going to get a lot more discussion online, and that's good. That may lead to more sales, more interest, more reviews, whatever it is you want to get out of making a game, you can get it. But now let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about the cons of making a long RPG. First of all, immediately I'm going to point out you're going to lose some of your audience. There are just people who won't play really long games. They're like, I don't have that time. I'm not a teenager anymore. I have kids. There's too many games I want to play. I can't devote 100 hours to one. But now this goes both ways. There are a lot of people out there who won't play really short games. They're like, hey, this game is too short. I'm not getting value for my money. Whatever reason they have. However, I believe it's bigger. The loss is bigger, both proportionally and in terms of total numbers, for making a long game. You'll lose more people on making a longer game than you will lose for making a shorter game. And the reason for that is I see people play short games and then complain, I wish that game was longer. I wish there was more for me to do. But they still played it, the short game, and they still liked it. Where a lot of people, they read a review and go, oh, this game is 120 hours long, and they don't even start. So this leads me to the second big negative for making a long RPG, which is some players will never finish it. And you all know what we're talking about. You people with Steam and GOG and Epic libraries full of games. I won't even get into the ones who don't install them, but the ones that you installed it and you played some of it and then you never finished. The longer the game is, the less likely people are to finish. There are games out there that have achievements for people just finishing the main storyline, and you see games out there that have like 1 or 2% of the people who installed and played the game actually finished it. That's a tiny, tiny percentage. So guess what that means is you put a lot of work into features and maps that no one will ever see. Maybe you made perks at a really high level. Nobody played that long. You made maps that are later in the game. Nobody got there. You put really cool NPCs with fun dialogues. No one talked to them. You put in all these different paths to go through the game. Nobody saw it. That's a lot of work. And you know what that means? A lot of money. And you just spent that and nobody saw it. Or very few people saw it. Then you have to ask yourself, if you want to make a long RPG, is your story deep enough to support a long play like that? Or are you stretching things out with lots of busy work for the player to do? And by the way, it's not just the story you have to ask those questions for. Is your setting interesting enough that you can have lots of different fun things happening in it that the player would want to explore and engage with? Because if your setting is endless desert and there's not much variety out there, it's probably going to get a little tiresome. And then you have to ask about the same question about mechanics. Are there interesting things for the player to get at higher levels? Is there things to look forward to? Are there aspirational perks, aspirational skill ranks? Or when you hit the skill cap, does something cool happen? These are things that will engage the player and make them want to play that long. But you have to ask yourself, is what you designed going to support that kind of engagement? One problem, and this comes with usually when you're doing the story, if you want to do that long-term reactivity, which is the pro of doing a long CRPG, can you telegraph that reactivity to the player? So the player's deciding to do something and they have different options here. Do I kill this NPC? Do I rescue them? Do I take their treasure? Do I leave it with them? Do they have any way of judging how this may affect them? Because I can tell you, if you find an NPC early in a game and you don't know anything about them, and it's leave them there, heal them, kill them, take their stuff, and then 80 hours later, you find out, I am totally screwed for the choice of action I picked 80 hours ago. I don't know anybody who's going to go back and reload a save game from back then. All you've done is really annoy them. So you either, if you have long-term reactivity, you want to telegraph it. Short-term, maybe not. They can go, oh, I killed him, and oh, this quest botched. I'm going to reload. Long-term reactivity, you may want to help telegraph that. Now let me just talk about a couple things that are just pure, this is Tim saying things he always says here. It's cuckoo clock. Bigger games come with more bugs. The longer your game is, the more the player plays it, you have more bugs. Some of it just come from the fact that they're playing longer. The things add up. Memory gets used more. Save games get bigger. And then bugs get associated with that. But it's not just code I'm talking about here. The more scripts you write, the more likely they're going to have bugs. The more design elements you have, the more complication you get in trying to support all the builds and making those things balanced. Oh, I'm not a huge balanced person. I'm more of a fun person. Making them all fun. You have a lot of features to juggle in a longer game. Can you do that? Are you up to that task? Also, a longer game, a bigger game means more testing. Your QA people are going to have a really good test plan. They're going to have to play with all these different builds. They're going to have to see what happens for playing a build for 100 hours versus 40. A 40-hour game, somebody in QA can play that once a week. A 100-hour game, that's going to take them at least 2.5, if not 3 weeks to get through. That means how many times are they going to replay your game and find bugs and be able to compare different builds? Not as much. So in addition to that time and money, just remember that a bigger game is always more money because you have more maps, more variety of creatures, more NPCs, more voiceover, more everything. And all that just costs money. Forget tracking down all the bugs and all that. Forget play testing all of that. The sheer act of creating all that, way more time, way more money. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that as a big con of one of these longer games. And it's why some people go, why are games costing 150 million, 500 million, a billion? That's why. Because some of them, they just want to make them so long and so deep that that's a lot of area to cover. Anyway, I hope this answered your question. Alessandro Gambino.